I'm Chuck Black, and this is the Age of Ingenuity, our weekly chronicle of Canada's current innovation economy. And here's what's happening. Canada is fast rolling out new high-speed 5G internet services. They're expected to revolutionize the Canadian telecom industry, and they're also expected to cost 40 billion Canadian or more over the next decade. The funds will be distributed amongst the usual giant domestic and international suspects, except for maybe Huawei, and they'll be distributed much like Captain Renault used to do in Casablanca. And we're going to talk about this, and we're going to talk about the expected effect on Canadian innovation.
And I'm Alan Calder, and I like the internet, and I want to become bigger, stronger, and faster, just like the $6 million man. We have the technology, and who cares if most of the money is allocated ends up in the pockets of the 1%?
I'm Brian Orlotti, and I'm hoping that you'll remember to like, subscribe, share, and comment on our discussion here, and support us financially on PayPal and Patreon. Your actions will feed the algorithms and bots which help to distribute our stories, and help keep the 1% from completely overwhelming the alternatives. Anyway, here are a few of the stories we're currently tracking. And our first piece comes from ZDNet, titled Canadian Major Telcos Effectively Lock Huawei Out of 5G Build by Chris Duckett. Canadian carriers Bell and Telus announced on Tuesday that each of them would not be continuing the use of Huawei equipment in their respective 5G networks, having signed deals with the Chinese giant's rivals instead.
So what we've got here is a decision by Telus and Bell to essentially lock Huawei technology out of their networks. And it seems to bypass the federal government. The Canadian government is formally still considering whether or not to allow Huawei products to be deployed as part of Canada's rollout of 5G technologies by major service providers.
So is this a technology issue, a service issue, or a security issue then?
Security issue primarily.
Right. So it's not an economic issue at all then.
No, although Brian,
I was just going to say it's a security and a political issue more, I think, because of the hype and the spotlight around 5G. Because Bell uses Huawei equipment in its 4G network, LTE network, and nobody raised an eyelash about that. So a lot of this is governed by politicians who don't understand and don't care about technology. It's just the 5G hype machine, and the U.S. doesn't want China to get a piece of it.
Well, if it's around Huawei and the States, then we just do what we're told. Arrest who? You want me to arrest someone because you don't like them? No problem. I'll throw them in jail. No problem, Mr. President.
Well, that's just it. We're towing the line. We're trying to play both sides against the middle. And the beauty of this is that we're saying no to Huawei, but not really saying no, so it leaves the door open to other deals. Huawei's not going to get completely locked out. This is all political theater, and there's plenty of other things that the Chinese can supply on the side.
And you mentioned just a moment ago, and you were telling me last night that Huawei technology remains embedded in Canada's telecom network, and there's been no word on whether or not the existing equipment will be phased out or replaced.
I very much doubt that's going to happen. Because it will cost the Canadian telcos millions upon millions of dollars to rip out perfectly functioning and good equipment for no real reason. I don't see that. I don't, because in the end of the day, the telcos, they got to watch their budgets like everybody else.
I think the core of what we're discussing here was noted in the June 5th, 2020 CBC News Post. State Department, the United States State Department, says U.S. will reassess intelligence sharing with Canada if it lets Huawei into its 5G network. You go.
Why did the U.S. not reassess intelligence sharing when we put Huawei equipment in our 4G network? It's ridiculous. It's illogical. It's inconsistent, and it's scattershot.
Well, 5 years ago we were friends. Nowadays we're enemies of Oceania, not the other nation.
Nice
Well,
1984
yeah,
reference.
I was
Appreciate
gonna say
that.
well done, Chuck. The thing is, we also don't forget that the problem is that we do whatever the states tells us to. Like that should be the big story here, is that we'll do what they tell us to. What's the problem? So they say we're locking you out of our security network. We should say, oh my God, it was next step nuclear war on us, and we're not going to have anyone to protect us. We're so weak in Canada. We
Well,
can't
the
do anything
official
about it.
reason is that the official reason is pretty straightforward. The Canadian 5G network, there is concern whether or not the Chinese government could build secret backdoor technologies into Huawei products, things which would allow the Chinese government to spy on Canadian activities.
So the same
And
thing. So yeah, the same.
I'm going to say flat out, as noted in the February 15th, 2020 Global News Post, most Canadians are wary of Huawei's role in 5G. Here's why some firms still favor it. Huawei and Chinese companies are required by law to comply with requests from the Chinese government to spy for it. Now, I'm not saying that the same thing it doesn't happen in the U.S.
Well,
they don't have laws they don't need laws like that in the U.S., Chuck. They just
that's just
built
it.
in.
That's exactly it. Chinese companies have to abide by Chinese laws. Canadian companies have to abide by Canadian laws. U.S. companies have to abide by U.S. laws.
I know laws. Oh, sorry, not my bad.
Why aren't we complaining about U.S.-based Cisco products? Are they so expensive and so bad that nobody wants to buy them?
Yeah.
Are they? Well, probably, I'd assume so.
It's just a mess, and it's a mess when technology is driven by politics and not by technical decision making. But such is life.
But money follows
yeah,
politics around too, right?
Yeah, I'm also going to ask another question. This is more of a Brian question. Are Ericsson or one of the other European providers wrapped around open source technology?
Well, in the case of 5G, yes, a number of the standards that are part of 5G are open source in the sense that they were created by committees of engineers at IEEE and other standards bodies.
Okay.
Yes, as far as I know, it's not proprietary in that sense.
My understanding is that open source technologies are independently verifiable, and you can go into open source technologies and figure out if somebody has a backdoor.
Yes.
Okay, so that's why we're going with the European standards. Is that fair?
Yes.
Is the decision by the private sector corporations to lock out Huawei technology, will that be enough to give the federal government a buy? My perception right now is that Justin Trudeau really doesn't want to make a formal decision to block Huawei technology at the governmental level. It allows him to make like Captain Renaud and Casablanca and pretend to work for one side and then go into another room and pretend to work for the other side and sort of like tread a middle path.
Yes, I agree. He's playing both sides against the middle.
That's typical liberal brokerage politics. It's not new. It's not even new for Trudeau.
And for examples of how 5G will change our lives, here's a piece from CNET titled "How 5G Will Change Your Life" by Roger Cheng. After years of hype and a bumpy first year of launches, carrier 5G networks are here. The technology is supposed to change your life with its revolutionary speed and responsiveness. But before we get into that, it's important to understand what the technology is, when and how it will affect you, and how to distinguish between the still growing hype and reality.
And going down in the article, I noticed that 5G is essentially supposed to be 10 to 100 times speedier than your typical cellular connection now. And it's supposed to be faster than anything you can get with a physical fiber optic cable going into your home. And it's, like we said before, it's anticipated to create about 250,000 new full-time, high-quality jobs over the next few years as the new technology rolls out.
It sounds about as popular as the Internet of Things, Chuck.
Well, I think most of the jobs will derive from Internet of Things technologies, remote robotics for medicine or for mining, perhaps, or for other areas like that. And Internet of Things technologies that'll track every place you go, everything you do, every breath you take.
They'll be watching you.
Yeah. And this goes into, I think, the downside of the argument, which is as noted in the December 3rd, 2019 CTV News post, lightning fast, but a political minefield, the trouble with 5G in Canada. There are technological problems with 5G. There are also substantive political problems. My understanding, Brian, is, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, is that at its highest levels, 5G does not travel well or penetrate obstructions such as buildings. And in order to get around those constraints, it'll require piggybacking on 4G networks initially, and it'll require over the long run the building of more transmission points to support its rollout. Is that a fair assessment?
That is fair, because 5G uses much higher frequencies than 4G technologies. It'll reflect off everything basically, and so your coverage area is reduced. So you need more cellular hotspots, and also apparently with the first generation of 5G phones, 5G tech is a huge power hog, so your battery will get much less life.
I don't think my battery's very good right now.
No. That's not 5G's problem, Chuck.
I also think it's noteworthy that some have expressed medical concerns relating to the need for so many more additional transmission points to support the network and the amount of bandwidth that consumes and the effects on radiation on the human body. What do you guys think about that?
What I wonder is that when they used to build things like these power towers and radio towers around the country, in the States and Canada both, how the cancer rates shot up around them as they denied there was any effect. That's what I think about it.
You go, Brian.
I was just going to say, in decades of testing with cellular technology going all the way back to the first generation, there have been no significant incidents of cancer, at least in all the scientifically published literature. So I think those fears are overblown, as they've been overblown for the 30 years that cell technology has been around.
Fair enough. I bet technology that has money has a way of solving its own problems, though, in courts. You know, like, it's not as if this technology's never affected anyone, I'd assume. Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe it's never affected anyone.
Well, even before cell technology came around, we've had radio transmissions, microwave transmissions shooting through the air for decades. And
is it sorry, Brian, to cut you off, but let's say, how comparable would microwave technology be to the radio 5G technology then?
Well, they're different frequencies, but they're well, especially with 5G, they're in a much higher frequency band than normal cell technology.
And because of that, you need less transmission points. Is that fair?
Well, actually, it's the opposite. You need more transmission points, because the higher the frequency, the more the radio waves have a tendency to bounce off of objects.
Okay.
It's called multipath. And so to compensate for that, you have to have more receivers in order to catch these bouncing signals.
Okay, I think it's worth noting at this point that Health Canada's official position on the technology is that it poses no risk, and I reference the October 21st, 2019 federal government webpage on Wi-Fi, and we'll include that in the show notes. I would also suggest that just because the federal government says it's so, doesn't mean that it necessarily is, and for that I reference the October 17th. 2019 Scientific American post. We have no reason to believe 5G is safe, but I also accept that it's really difficult to prove a negative. I would argue that this is a nice segue into our next point, the list of foundational technologies which are supposed to immediately benefit from this 5G rollout. They're listed in most of the literature I've looked at. And they deal with things that are large and complex and robotics and Internet of Things and all encompassing, and they track everything and they make automated decisions based on what they've tracked, and the rollout seems to be heavily weighted in favor of large, complex, and centralized products from huge multinational service providers, which I suppose is great if you're one of the 1%. but it's different from the original internet, which acted as a huge distributed network, which allowed millions of disparate ideas and people to come together in new and innovative ways, and benefited the smaller players more than the bigger players. A lot of the huge tech companies that are huge in tech companies now were small 1 and 2 person operations 20 years ago. And the original internet benefited the individual more than I think this 5G rollout is going to benefit us. What do you guys think about that?
Well, one of the selling points for 5G was the ability for large organizations to chop up their bandwidth in a very granular way and then resell that bandwidth. So basically, organizations can become their own internet providers and sell their excess bandwidth to other people. But like you said, that tends to favor large organizations who have lots of money to spend on their infrastructure.
Yeah, I don't know how that's going to benefit me. I think it's going to raise my Rogers bill over the next few years.
But everyone will have faster internet, including people and corporations, and your bill will go up. So that's good then.
Well,
you go.
Oh, sorry. I was just going to say, one of the other things they're really pitching this for is mobile systems like autonomous cars and Internet of Things. Those are the 2 big selling points. And the idea is, especially with autonomous cars, is the idea that you can have vehicles communicating with each other in real time so that they can avoid collisions with each other, know where they are at all times. And the idea is to, boost driving efficiency and safety.
Well, that's a good commercial thing. I understand the benefits of that. There's obvious benefits to it.
And our next piece comes from Moses Neimer's famous Idea City Conference. Something I never thought I'd see, the Idea City Conference being held during a pandemic on live stream.
For free.
For free, when normally they charge you $5,000.
Yeah, I hate to push a point, but Neimer has reminded us of the original internet foundational technology. It was essentially a huge multi-way distributed network which allowed disparate ideas and people to come together in new and innovative ways. It didn't favor large, complex, and centralized products from gigantic multinational providers. It didn't favor the 1%, and it was essentially free for all. Although, we paid taxes to get it set up, much like the phone company. And Neimer, after 20 years of charging $5,000 to get in, he's given us an interesting conversation. It's mostly one way, but it is free. It is a valuable conversation, and it's something any one of us can use to our advantage. So I like this callback to the original intent of the internet. I think it's important to compare to what 5G and some of the other technology is trying to favor right now. And I don't know, I'm going to register for it. I'm going to watch some of the sessions.
Well, Chuck, I know you don't have $5,000, so what a boom.
yeah, well.
And those are the stories we're covering this week. As always, the articles we've referenced are listed in the show notes. Keep in touch with us on Facebook, Gab, LinkedIn, Minds, Pinterest, Steemit, and Twitter. Check out other stories we're tracking on our Canadian Innovation News and upcoming events Scoop It feeds. And remember to like, subscribe, share, and comment on our posts. Your actions will feed the algorithms and bots which help to distribute our stories.
If you'd like to promote your event or your activity, or if you think you have insight into Canada's current innovation economy, please send me an email. I'm at chuck.black@protonmail.com.
We're currently on YouTube, BitChute, and Vimeo, and hope to be on other platforms soon. If you like the content we create, send some money to our Patreon and PayPal accounts. For only $10 a month, you can view from 60-80 minutes of raw footage that goes into creating every episode.
And that's all for this week. We'll be back next week with more stories covering our current age of ingenuity.